pass to Kassie from ActionStation. You're unmuted.
O tēnā koutou katoa, ngā mihi nui ki a tātou I tēnei pō. Thank you to everyone who's tuning in at the moment, to the speakers so far, and to Nicole and to Marama for accepting this petition. My name is Kassie and I'm a community organiser with ActionStation. For those who don't get our emails 10 times a week, we are an independent community campaigning organisation and we are hosting the Emergency Housing Plan petition alongside of ours' petition for rental and mortgage suspensions. So nearly 2 weeks ago, just to take you back, we took a survey of our members asking them about how they want us to respond to COVID-19. Over 4,000 of those people supported ActionStation campaigning on a freeze for rent and mortgage repayments so that people can keep a roof over their heads at this time. So from the beginning of the pandemic, our campaign team, and just want to shout out to that team, especially Vanessa Cole, who has just been a wealth of knowledge around housing. Our team was really concerned about our communities who are already affected by the housing crisis, as you have mentioned here, Robert, and how this will drive people even further into debt and difficulty. The health advice, as you've mentioned, Antonia, is that we've been given is to self-isolate. But what does that mean when people do not have safe, secure housing to retreat to? The government has made some piecemeal responses, such as a ban on evictions for the next 3 months, as you mentioned, Robert, and a limited mortgage holiday for some homeowners, but it just doesn't go far enough. People are really worried about the financial stress that COVID-19 is causing. Reports are coming out that people who are less well off are going to suffer the most from the pandemic, both in the short and long term. And to be honest, it's a bit insulting to hear the government say that they have done all they can for renters. And it's also quite condescending to ask people to just speak to their landlords if they're struggling. Don't get me wrong, there are some generous landlords, but I've been renting for 12 years and I can't imagine a single landlord putting my well-being over their financial investment. I can't imagine that ever happening. We are hearing, like Robert, of people who've lost their jobs, have had people move out, been stuck in between tenancies during lockdown is another one. They've talked to their landlords and the landlords have simply said no to any kind of negotiation or decreases in rent. It's not rocket science that landlords and property managers have more power to decide what happens with their properties. To ignore this reality is to tell renters that they are essentially on their own and really that they are the ones that deserve to shoulder the burden of pandemic debt. You know, it guts me because it's not a surprise that we're in this situation. If our housing system doesn't work in the good times, then it's definitely not going to work during a crisis. So this is why we have the Emergency Housing Plan. It's a raft of asks that the government can immediately take action on to offer housing relief to those who still need it. So to list the asks, and thank you to those who have signed, to be clear about what we're calling for is, first of all, an immediate amnesty from paying rent. Rent should be cancelled, not put off to another date. Property investors take a risk when they invest, and their economic security shouldn't come before people needing a safe home during a crisis. We are going to see more and more people who just can't pay their rents. We already are. And no one should have to go into debt for their home, and especially not the layer of people who already don't have any wealth or assets to begin with. The second ask is we're calling for long-term rent caps so people can recover financially and emotionally from COVID-19. Our economic system, as it exists, is not one based on meeting human need to begin with. Yeah. So of course, it can't look after us during a global crisis. Things are not going to get easier over the next few months or years, but we can prepare for this. We know we have some idea of what is coming. A rent cap means limiting the amount of money that any landlord or property manager is allowed to charge their tenants. Right now, 1 in 4 households spend over 40% of their income on rent and housing costs. That's nearly half our wage for some of us on rent. So basically, heaps of us are just going to work to put a roof over our heads. And we've got to ask, is this right? And is this necessary? Should we be spending so much money to pay off someone else's investment? One option is in the long term, the mid-term and the short term, capping rents at 25% of people's incomes for example, so that they can weather the storm and recover well on the other side. The third ask is that we are calling for the government to buy unoccupied houses and buildings on the private market for public housing. Before COVID-19, we had at least 40,000 people recorded in states of homelessness, including people couch surfing and living in overcrowded homes. On the flip side, we have over 190,000 unoccupied homes, also known as ghost homes, not related to ghost chips, that aren't being used. 40,000 of these homes are in Auckland alone. So instead of talking about how we have a housing shortage, how about we start redistributing the homes that already exist? The last but not the least ask is that we want to make sure that people in emergency housing are looked after. This means removing all obligations to pay for the costs of the temporary housing and reinstate this as a non-recoverable grant. You know, it goes without saying that we shouldn't even have people living in motels, hostels, and rest homes as a normal situation. Many of these makeshift rooms don't even have proper kitchens or basic facilities. But if people are forced to live in emergency housing, they should not be going into debt because of it. So these are our petition asks. We think that it really reflects some of the concerns of New Zealanders about housing. It must be said, I think, that now is the time that we really have to question who is able to profit from a global crisis. Should property managers be making a profit right now? Should property owners have their investments protected over everything else? Should banks be able to make money off interest during a mortgage holiday? We need to ask these hard questions now more than ever, or we will have even greater inequality in the years after this pandemic. I do believe there is an opportunity to imagine a better housing system. It's never too soon to ask, what will it take to move us out of housing crisis and into housing wellness? Can we really live into the value of kindness when we know that only our most wealthy layer of people can even afford secure homes? We need to challenge the idea, as mentioned before, that houses are mainly an investment, when homes are so much more than that, which is even more obvious when we're in lockdown, right? Homes are so important. This can be a turning point for housing, and our supporters are asking the government to continue the courage and the kindness that they've stepped into during this crisis and make bold housing decisions that will look after everyone now and into the future. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Kia ora.